Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do one of these,
Oh, brilliant.
and then you
Thank
can
you.
sync up the Zoom timing with the audio recording that I'm going to send you.
We've had 200 guests on this podcast. No one's been kind enough to ever remind me to do that. So thank you. I forget every time, and my producer hates me and I have to pay them double for it. It's not great.
I'm a professional musician.
So Dan Mangan, professional musician, live on Dirt from the Road, and I originally heard about you because I was working the Euro circuit probably 10 years ago. I would see your posters everywhere,
Hmm.
and our label guy Jorg was a big fan of yours. So I
No
got
way.
turned on your, checked it out, saw you at
Does he want to sign
Reeperbahn
me?
once. He's the label guy. He wants to sign you. I don't know if there's still a music industry in Europe. Maybe there
Right.
is.
I mean, it is good to know that that posters work. That's cool.
I'm a fan of posters. I don't know if it's just because I'm like I pay special attention to them because I love to make them and we use them for our own tours. But I don't know.
Hmm.
What do you think? You think the weight of an actual physical poster seen in reality carries a lot more weight than digital poster?
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like having just been in Europe, they are still going strong on the posters in Europe. Like they do big posters. Like here, an average poster is
Yeah.
11 by 17 inches, but there, like it's not uncommon that you'll see like a 2 or a 3 foot poster for like a band that can sell 80 tickets. Like that's the crazy
Totally.
thing is like here there's like a pole by my house where there's always posters, and it's always like shows going on at Rogers Arena or whatever. Um, it's like people don't really bother postering for small shows anymore, but in Europe, it's still a thing. Like and like huge walls full of posters. And what they'll do is they'll take the same poster and put them like 20 beside each other in a row, so it like covers
Oh
this
yeah.
wall,
Yeah.
and then you're sort of like, oh man, like this person must be important. I'm seeing their
Totally.
face over and over and over again. And clearly, it worked. And I got inside the head of your man Jorg. So that's cool.
Super York. Yeah, and I just thought I feel like that'd be a cool job to be like one of those wheat paste poster guys that runs around the city illegally at night and throws up posters. I mean, I've done it once or twice, and it's kind of sketchy, feels dangerous,
Hmm.
but I could do that as a job. I think that'd be great.
I think you quickly find that there is as much of a like mafia-esque poster economy as there is for like people who collect refundable cans and stuff like that. Like there's a whole economy going on, and there's like what's the word, like turf, like this is my
Yeah.
block kind of thing. And I remember years ago when I was just starting out postering around Vancouver a little bit, and then finding that like a couple hours later, like the poster guy who wants a monopoly on postering around Vancouver, who everyone knows you drop 50 bucks in an envelope through his mail slot and put the posters in the bin or whatever. um he had torn them all down. So
Oh, what a bastard.
yeah, it's like, and it was as if I had violently like infringed on his turf, right? And it was like, no, 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 you pay me to put up the posters. Every other poster gets taken down. It's a rough scene out there, man.
Well, Dan, I'll do you one better, one worse, however you want to think about it. In college, putting up posters, you know how much work it is. It costs
Hmm.
money, effort. It's like can be kind of like embarrassing. I don't want people to like
Yep.
see me putting up posters for my own band. I don't want to be
Yeah.
seen. But going around the block, taking a loop back, and then like the promoter overlords have covered your posters. And you
Hmm.
can't even pay them to do your show. So you'll never poster again after that. They have so much firepower and manpower, you're toast. Your scene cred
It's
is
just
over.
one more example of how the middle class of everything is getting squeezed out, you know?
How's the middle class doing in Canada?
I don't think it's much better. I'm probably not doing any better than they are in the US. But I mean, we have some, we have a bit of a safety net here in some ways. We are the pejorative nanny state, right? We've got universal health care. We've got subsidized public education, post-secondary education. Um, and yeah, we're like the great communist North. So, which is hilarious. Like, anytime somebody refers to anything even remotely socialist as being like, communist or something, or one thing that I love in internet discourse is, and forgive me for having, I've studied a lot of public or what political internet, I've studied so much I know what to call it. um what do you call it, political science and sociology. But like, when people equate, okay, socialism with like authoritarianism, and they're completely different things, right? Authoritarianism is a system of like government in terms of like how it runs, and it's a democratic or not democratic um, function. And socialism is a form of economy. It has nothing to do with how a government runs necessarily. It's how the government spends its money and collects taxes and things like that. But one system is completely unrelated to the other system. And so people, when I see like, mega nuts or something like that talking about socialism as being like North Korea, it's like, no, no, no. North Korea is authoritarianism, which is exactly where America is inching toward.
Well,
So,
saying those two things are the same thing. That's one of the internet's favorite three things to do, you know.
mm, yeah, I mean, and fair enough. I mean, the internet rarely gets it wrong. So, way to go, internet.
I have enjoyed your takes on some, just pop culture over the years. Um, and the latest one was the Pitchfork one, which I thought was really good. Um, which I don't know, Pitchfork folded, and is Pitchfork done? Did they give you any love early on in your musical endeavors, or was it all? Did they ever give you like a horrible shot album review? Tell me about that.
Nothing at all. No, they never even mentioned me, which is exactly, of course, when I shit on them publicly, this is exactly what people bring up. It's like, oh, they just never gave you any love and you're just bitter. And I'm like, well, yeah, obviously I'm bitter. But I think that was my point, was that like the people who, were like valiantly in favor of Pitchfork and waving the flag were the bands that had gotten like favorable reviews. But back in the day, less so now, back in the day, like they could literally ruin a career. Like if they gave you a bad review, promoters
Yeah.
wouldn't want to book your tour anymore and stuff like that. Um,
Wow.
and there was a sort of like level of snark that I didn't appreciate. However, it was one thing that, a few things that were brought to my attention after I was accused of grave dancing. They didn't, they're not gone. They're still there. They were already owned by Condé Nast, and they were folded under the GQ brand rather than being their own brand, which is some like serious, like capitalist wasteland jargon for, I don't know what the fuck that means, but like basically a bunch of people were laid off, and it meant that they could union bust Pitchfork, because I guess the people who worked for Pitchfork were trying to assemble or something like that. um so a bunch of people lost their jobs, and a bunch of music writers lost their jobs. So in theory, these are like creative, artistic writer people who lost their jobs. That's not cool. I don't like that. And I don't like that decisions about this magazine, or whatever you want to call it, blog, um, are being made in like a hedge fund boardroom. I don't love that like more and more power
Sure.
is getting, you know, uh, conglomerated in the hands of people who manage money instead of managing art and culture and whatever magazines. Um, but I mean, that was kind of like my point, was like, Pitchfork was so divisive, and it was so spiteful and snarky, that it made people feel like they weren't supposed to like most music, like that they were
Totally.
supposed to
Totally.
hate everything except a few really, really cool things. And I think that that is a fucking shitty way to live your life. To like,
Oh,
you
I mean, I started playing music right in that Pitchfork era, and people were mean. Like,
mm,
and like I listened back, like the hipsters hated us in Madison, Wisconsin. I think primarily because we put so much effort into like, they didn't like that. They didn't like us transparently trying hard. Um, but yeah, it was rough. I remember getting like some hate mail and people drawing penises on our posters quite often, and that was the era, man. It was like if it wasn't cool, it was fucking shitty music. And I do listen back to some of those albums we made when we were like 20, 21 years old. They're pretty weird. There's like no song structure. There's nothing like really down the pipe for
Yeah, but
mainstream about them. Yeah.
but when the writer saw you play at South by Southwest, one of the people in your band was wearing a bandana that was derivative from another bandana that another band member was wearing from like a different band that got a bad review. And it's like it was also like I think that was my point is that it's not a music magazine. It's a pop culture magazine. It's like a fashion magazine masquerading as a music magazine and using music as like a compass as to how to tap into like what is at the crest of the cool zeitgeist. Now, that was my take on it. I haven't looked at Pitchfork in like 10 years. So like that was my take on it back in the day. And a couple Pitchfork writers reached out to me and were like, fuck you, man. Like, I'm not snarky. Read some of my stuff. And I actually went and like read some, really quality music journalism from a handful of really great writers. So like I was corrected. And I hate the idea that like once you've said something on the internet, you have to double down and like never concede that you were
Hmm.
wrong, or like this idea that like, oh, I gotta like stick to my guns because people were mad at me. And also like apology culture is flawed as well. But I also, I was like, oh, I got to do my diligence here. I haven't even looked at this site in 10 years. Maybe I should read some. And I read some really great articles about some really great records. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Like, I'm not right about everything. Like I,
I mean,
it,
I thought you were, but then those writers aren't wrong either. Like I'm sure
yeah.
there were writers that didn't want to be mean and wanted to pick people up and be positive. But that wasn't the ethos of the publication. Regardless, it's good. It's good. It does feel like it's okay to have a sense of humor in music again. Things do feel a lot lighter now. Um,
Mhm.
you know, the geeky or nerds or whatever you want to call them, uncool people, get their time in the sun too now. And it's, you don't want your masses of music listeners being swayed by like one pissed off kid in Brooklyn with, upside down glasses. So things are getting more optimistic.
Are they? Yeah, I mean, maybe the like social media game now. Yeah, like we no longer have critics telling us what's good. So now it's just what goes viral, and what goes viral is often like nursery rhymes that are written for adults, and things that are like capturable in a 15-second clip. And so then you have people writing for the medium, like trying to write something that's like I I I, I really struggle with this like have you noticed like so much music that trends on TikTok or Instagram is music that's like, I saw one the other day. It's like this guy, he's like, in 1997, my dad's condom broke and now I have depression or something like that. And it had
Of course.
like 100,000 shares, millions of views. And it's like, yeah, that's clever and it's kind of funny and I enjoyed it too. But like that's what transcends the medium. That's what works on the medium. And that's not all music is. Like music isn't just silly, jokey songs. And so things that are more patient, things that require a little bit more of the listener to dig in, they just don't do well. They don't get watch time. And so the algorithm doesn't, pick them up because the algorithm is in the business of making sure people watch for as long as possible.
Well, Dan, you're not bowing to your Lord, the algorithm, enough.
That's right.
You're
Lord
one true
Algo.
God. Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I have made a promise to my producer Kylie to stop talking about the algorithm as much as I do because it's so depressing. I'm like, hey, you got any feedback for the podcast? She's like, yeah, it's I love the pod, but the algorithm talk, it's pretty depressing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would like to believe that there's a way to do it and kind of build without being a TikTok band or something. And I'm always
Mhm.
pondering for angles and That sounds
Yeah,
confusing in itself.
like
Pondering for angles.
I think that like with most culture, the second that you sort of see something that's working, and then when you try and do it, it feels old because it already worked for somebody else. And like I just maybe this is audacious or naive or whatever, but like I just feel like if you just keep making the most interesting music you can't please anyone else. Like you can't even, I can't even like please people that like love me, people in my house. You know what I mean? I don't, I think like you just have to make things that tickle you in a nice way, you know, kind of tickle your heart and your soul. And, I don't like when it comes to my own music, like I'm not always, touching the truth as I like to call it, but every now and then I can, honestly say I'm touching the truth. Like I'm touching something vital and interesting in a song, and that's great. That's the best feeling in the whole world. Keep it in the pocket for. Don't release it for as long as possible. Keep it in that like state where it just belongs to you in this like infinity realm where it's not quantified by streams and likes and follows and
Right.
success or non-success. It just sort of like lives in the dream world still. And then when you release it, you just gotta, I don't know, like let it go. And if it gets nowhere, then that's great. Think about all of the great emotions you had along the way, making it and sitting on it and pondering about it and thinking about it. That's where the feeling of success comes. Now, of course, you also have to like pay for your life, and that's troubling in all kinds of other ways. But from a creative standpoint, like I really try and hold on to that feeling, like, because I know how good it feels when I'm like in the zone in my studio here and just like killing it and feeling like I'm chasing some kind of crazy gut instinct through a rabbit hole of musical things and it's working, or when I'm writing a song with someone else and ideas are sparking and we're laughing and it's fun and it's like that. That's life, man. Like that's the really good creative stuff. And I've done all kinds of embarrassing stuff for the algo to try and like boost my realm online and stuff like that. And sometimes it kind of works. And then the unfortunate thing about that is it encourages you to do more of that garbage, you know?
Of course.
Um, but
Then you feel hollow. You're a hollow man inside.
Yeah, like I have friends with millions of followers on TikTok who are sort of just like, what am I doing with it though? Like, like I've spent all this time building this thing, and anytime I try and put anything that I actually care about into it, it doesn't, nobody cares. They just keep wanting more of the gimmick. And like that's really says something, you know? I think that like some Buddhist monks would have something to say about that. And I don't know. I just like more and more these days I'm thinking like I'm gonna keep participating. I'm gonna keep posting stuff, but like I'm just gonna put some stuff up there that I hope and think is interesting and true. And if it doesn't get a huge like viral sensation, well, maybe it never was supposed to, and maybe
Sure.
that's okay.
Well, maybe it's time to start like a full-on side project that doesn't use the internet. Or maybe Dan Mangan goes full analog. The only way to
Yeah.
get the records are mail order, and maybe it's branded like a 1994 Columbia CD House catalog, but you tweak the logo and make kind of a play on that. Could be kind of funny, but
Yeah. See, now I can
only
think of
only
the
yeah.
like, I'm picturing like the time lapse content of capturing all of this analog awesomeness, and then that goes viral, you know?
Yeah, yeah. They always say like everything you do, you should be filming it. And man, I'm at home now making all these songs on this old Tascam tape machine. I'm just having such a great time in the zone. Like you say, I can't think of anything that would more precisely take me out of the zone than to start filming
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah, like
Anyway,
even having like a photographer in the studio or like a videographer in the studio or something like that, like adding one more person in the mix, it changes the chemistry. Probably not for the
of
better,
course,
and it puts people on edge. So like they know that they're being filmed. It they start acting weird for the camera or
of
whatever.
course.
I mean, it's interesting because I've got a 7 and a 10-year-old. We don't put them on social media at all. They've never been, we've never posted anything about them. Um, but like they're growing up in a world where it's really normal that everyone's just being filmed all the time. So in a way, they are actually far more comfortable with it on some to some extent.
Sure.
And I think that that's why you see young people who are like, 18 or whatever on TikTok who are actually really pretty authentic in front of the camera. And it's almost because like they've had a whole generation to get over it and get really
Of course, yeah.
normalized to it. And they know like they know exactly what caption to write. They don't have to think about it too hard. It's just like, oh, some bullshit. And like, bam, that's the best caption ever. Because they sort of, they kind of grew up in it in a different way. That being said, I'm holding out, letting my kids have social media until they're as old as possible.
Yeah, well, I can't say I disagree. Have you been able to make a living on music the past, or do you have any other means of income?
I quit my serving job in 2009 and
Nice.
going strong ever since. Lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones, man. I mean, I might not be in the 1%, but I'm sure I'm in the top 5% or whatever, just being a musician who makes a living from music. And I never take that for granted. But like I don't have a huge following in America, although it is weirdly my biggest Spotify zone. But like I can't sell a lot of tickets in America, maybe like 100 tickets in most towns. But in
Wow.
Canada, I've had a really fortunate and privileged career, and it blows my mind that there's people who come to the shows, people who buy merch, people who support me through my Substack, and
Oh, tell me about that. Is it like
yeah,
a Substack? So what do you put on the Substack? It's like a $5 a month kind of thing?
yeah. I mean, I've been strong on the newsletter front from day one. I've been collecting
Mm,
emails like at the merch table since forever.
same, yeah.
And I was spending $120 a month on MailChimp just to host, a very relatively large mailing list. And then all these things came along. There's like Patreon was there, and then there's I know that there's like a bunch of other competitors that kind of do a similar thing, and um, I just never felt quite right to me. I think the thing I didn't like about Patreon is the idea of like obligation for content. Like Patreon kind of felt like, yeah, like you give your subscribers or your followers like, a new song a month or something. Like I don't want to be beholden to like a schedule. Like I don't want to
Mm,
like I know I owe you content every month because you paid me money. Like I think if people are paying an artist money um, monthly, it's because they love that person's art and they want them to be able to buy groceries.
sure.
And and so I didn't do Patreon or anything like that. And then when Substack came around, honestly, I started it just because it was a way that I could run a newsletter for free and save 120 bucks a month that I was spending on MailChimp. And then I realized like, oh, you can kind of like, I had hundreds of concerts over the years recorded. I tend to record a lot of concerts that I do. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I have all these like this huge vault of concert recordings that I could put on a Substack, and I could like put that behind a paywall. And then, along the way, I kind of figured out a few other things. There's like an Ask Me Anything thing where people can type in a question, and then I'll do like a long form response. Um, I do guitar tutorials. Every now and then, I'll just like put a bit of writing, like an essay up there. I do my newsletter through there, and it's just proven a really great way to keep in touch with people. There's sort of like, yeah, I can see like the diehards are in the comments. And it's heartwarming to sort of see these people interact and comment and talk with each other and stuff like that. And I feel like Instagram or whatever is sort of like for the 30-second clip of a song. Substack for me, that's where you put like the 8-minute long guitar tutorial. That would it's sort of like a rather than a shallow but wide net, you're casting a very narrow but deep net for the people who might actually be interested in that.
Totally. And when you migrated from MailChimp over to Substack, did was that a ball ache? Did like your open rate go down or go up, or was it pretty easy to switch over?
It was pretty easy. In fact, I think my open rate went up. Um, and probably because like it's a bit of a ball, like just figuring out the tech. There's a big tutorial on Substack, like here's how to migrate your newsletter over from MailChimp. You have to like go to MailChimp and like export a specific file and then like change the file extension name and then up
You.
that to your grandfather, and then your grandfather writes it on a thing, and then they say it was a bit of a thing, but like they walk you through it step by step. I wasn't the first person who'd done this. And um and so actually I found that, there might have been a few people who unsubscribed or something like that, but not a lot. And the number at this, keeps going up. The amount of subscriber keeps going up. I put QR codes around the venues and stuff like that. I even put a QR code. I hold it up on a banner like from the stage
Oh,
during the show, and I'm like, scan this, motherfuckers, and
dude, Dan, I'm so proud of you. Like that is I don't know anyone else who's been as newsletter centric as you. That's thanks for having the iron balls to be a little shameless about the newsletter. It's key. It's clutch.
yeah, and it's not cool, right? Like it doesn't look cool being like, join my newsletter, but at the same time,
Yeah.
like, just logistically, like I'm 40 years old, I got two kids, like I am running a business
Right.
here and I'm trying to seed that business with as much honest, good art as possible. But like, the ins and outs of it is like it kills me to think that when I'm in Boston or wherever, there might be people who would love to be at that show and they have no idea
Totally.
it's even happening because the
Totally.
algorithm or whatever didn't catch them. So if they can join that newsletter, then they might not open it or whatever. Like you don't have to open every single one. You don't have to read every single one, but at least it's like what I say at the concerts is like, the large multinational social media companies, they make their money by inhibiting access between us. Um,
Yeah.
and so one of the kindest things that you can do for any artist that you like is to go onto their website and just join their friggin' newsletter or text them if that's the thing. I do that as well. People can text me. Texting is really cool because the app that I use for it, I can actually text people by location. So I can just text people in Phoenix what the ticket link is for Phoenix or whatever, which is really, really
Nice.
handy. And I
What do you
text
use
out,
for that?
I use an app called Community.
Okay.
And it's not very cheap, but it's really effective.
And how do you get text signups?
During the concert, I say I'm recording the show tonight. I'll send you a Dropbox link with an MP3 of tonight's show if you text me the password. And then I say, be like, I'm in New York, so the password is Liberty or whatever. And then they text me that, and then I can like assemble all the people who send me that word into a group, into a cohort, and then I just text the Dropbox link to that cohort a couple days later. And it's great, and people can text me pictures of their dogs. I go through there, I respond as often as I can, and I'm pretty accessible. I think some artists really thrive behind the veil and the smoke and mirrors and all that stuff, but I I'm kind of a normal dude, and I feel like if somebody reaches out to you, you should do your best to get back to them. It's like the fact
Yeah.
that we don't know each other well, or whatever. I don't know. I just feel like, if your friend texts you, eventually you should text them back. And I don't feel an
Yeah.
obligation to
Yeah.
text everybody back, but I do my best to go through them and like, try to get back to people.
Yeah, man. Well said. I mean, it is so soul crushing to like, you have your A tier friends, but then you have like all your super friendly acquaintances or pals, and like, you'll be in Austin and hit one of them up. People you've stayed at each other's houses,
Mhm.
and sometimes I can't believe that I get nothing back. I'm like, you've slept in my house. But
Yeah.
what it
You
is,
know,
people are busy.
I think that people are busy. Also, how like when you don't get the message back, your perception is they hate me and they never want to talk to me again.
Yeah, totally.
Honestly, I think 9 times out of 10, people are just overwhelmed and they're anxious and they're like, just like, I can't look at that right now. like they
Totally.
get a text and they're like, they might think you're awesome. They might think you're like the coolest fucking dude. And yet they don't want to get back to you because it's like, what if I say the wrong thing? Or I'm not in the right mood to interact right now. Or what, like, I think people are just, um, I think they're riddled with encumbrance. And I think sometimes the social obligation of even just responding a simple text or even like tapping like on a text feels like more than they can handle right now. And so I like try to be very forgiving with people about that stuff.
Totally. Remember early on, kind of in the when all the social medias were kind of forming and rising to prominence, there was like that kind of short window where it was like, is it cool to not respond to people who appreciate you? Like, is this bad to like give like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So it was like it's kind of interesting to you and I living on both sides of mystique pre and post kind of
Yeah.
social media mainstream. But
And
yeah,
I've
gotta
been
be
there. I've honestly, I feel like there's like most of the music industry is sort of like built around the smoke and mirrors of like making someone appear to be a star and then people treat them like a star and then they actually become a star. And part of it is this like, yeah, like they're just like a crazy artist, man, and they're not going to get back to you because they're too busy being cool, you know? And and it's sort of like the pedestaling like you know the idea of like Frank Sinatra's manager like hiring actors to faint in front of his concerts and stuff like that to like add
what?
to the hysteria
Never
and
heard that.
um yeah all kinds of stuff like this idea that like if you kind of like seed the hype then the hype becomes the story and it doesn't even really matter what the music is because the hype is the story people like something because they think that they're supposed to or whatever um and that is a real part of this industry and like I think that you can you know whatever monster you feed is the monster that grows, right? So if you are constantly feeding the monster of like I'm a star or I'm a crazy artist and I'm full of mystique, it might work. It might totally work. And you might find yourself doing heroin in the janitor closet at Madison Square Gardens or something like that. You know, like
The
because
dream.
everyone treats you like you're this special crazy thing, and you just still feel like a normal person inside. And nobody can relate to you because everyone's awkward around you, except for you know a handful of people that you trust. And then you know, they're just saying yes and calling you a genius all the time and you're like oh god what is me do they like me do they like the success it's like hockey players they all get married when they're like 18 years old like they all get married really young because it's like you know I think that there's this thing like once you are signed once you get drafted people just want you for your money they want you for your status or whatever so it's like
Is that
um
is that is that real? That's a thing that happens in hockey?
I think so. I mean, it also probably has to do with I'm not saying it's a causation, maybe a correlation. Also, you know, a lot of professional hockey players come from small towns, and people from small towns tend to get
Yeah.
married earlier
Okay.
and, you know, live a more conservative nuclear life. But, um, so who knows? I don't know. But I've heard that. But I think it's like, you know, if you're truly successful, if you're Billie Eilish or something like that, like, you know, I think that she's pretty amazing and that she's been able to project a fairly real and human kind of persona and yet
Yeah.
achieve stardom and iconic star world that you know is kind of just like completely out of reach for you know almost every single person on the planet
And
um
making pretty weird music too at the same
totally
time. Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
like and I loved that like the first one was weird and dark and moody and then like the second one was also that but it was like kind of just sounded like a lot of the melodies on the second record, just like Beatles melodies. Like they were just like straight out of Abbey Road, it felt like. And you know, people wanted her to dip and she went the other way. And I think she's really cool. I think she's great. And I think that she's a good, you know, a person for young artists to look up to and all that kind of stuff. Um I've totally lost my train of thought. I have no idea where I'm going.
How did the music industry kind of help you out early on? What was it that kind of helped get you going and on the rocket ship, so to speak, and get a following early on?
Yeah, I mean, I started touring like, you know, this was like MySpace days, like 2006, and I back then you could still really benefit from the gatekeepers, and I spent like 4 years 2005 through 2009. I spent 4 years just literally saying yes to every single gig that I could find anywhere in the world. You know, somebody was like, "Oh, like I like your music. Do you want to come play this coffee shop in like, Utrecht?" I'd be like, "Yes, yeah, I do." Now I'm going to book
Nice.
10 other shows around Europe, you know, literally booking them over MySpace and emailing random people that I found online. And and so I really cut my teeth, and I did it the old fashioned way, playing to like 5 people a night until it was 20 people a night, until it was 50 people a night, until it was 100. And then in Canada, and, kind of growing it until it was in the thousands. But um, it was kind of old school. And there was a time like back when arts weeklies still existed, like weekly newspapers that you'd see for free around in coffee shops. There was one tour in 2009 where I had just won this like prize from SiriusXM. It was worth like 25,000 bucks, and I bought a van, and we were going back and forth across Canada, just touring like nonstop. And there was this one tour, and we were only playing to like maybe 200 people a night. It wasn't like hadn't like truly blown up, but it was right on the, I'd sort of like pushed the rock up the hill, up the hill, up the hill, and the rock started rolling down the other side. And I was on the cover of like every single Arts Weekly in Canada. Like we'd show up in Calgary, I was on the cover. We'd show up in Edmonton, I was on the cover. We'd show up in Winnipeg, I was on the cover. And it was a really crazy time, and it felt like you were getting the benefit of the doubt. You felt like, all these people who um, editors and things that had like stacks of CDs on their desks, compact discs for people who don't know what a CD is. Um, and it was like mine just happened to be at the top of the pile on every desk. And so when they're reaching there, I need got to write about something. They just reached. And I'd sort of reached a peak of zeitgeist, sort of cultural relativity. Mind you, this is like in a very niche, like Canadian indie scene. Um, and it felt like I was getting the benefit of the doubt, in a way that probably, in hindsight, you know, a lot of white dudes used to get all the time and never thought anything of it and just felt completely deserving of it. And there's
Yeah.
probably a lot of marginalized people, women, people of color, on the sidelines going like, I'm working just as hard as this guy. I'm doing everything I can. I'm just as good a songwriter. Why aren't I on the magazine? And but I kind of in the era that I came up, you could still see festivals, and it's like every band in the festival was just like white guys.
Mhm.
Uh, no wonder it had to shift. Like it just got boring,
Yeah.
and there was so much other interesting stuff going on. Um, but that being said, like I benefited from some of that old gatekeeper world because even though I never got into the major label stuff, I never really crushed it on radio or anything like that. Um, I was able to essentially, like, I played every festival, like South by Southwest and North by Northeast and CMJ and what are the one like London Calling and the Great Escape in Brighton and like others. They're all over the world. The Big Sound in Australia, like there's all these like conferences, and I would play these conferences over and over and over again. And then eventually, I think people just sort of like got used to seeing my name on the schedule, and they were like, "Oh, I might as well check this guy out. He keeps getting booked."
Yeah.
And now I that might be a waste of money now, but back then it was just sort of like part of the propulsion. It was like the only way up the ladder. And
And those didn't pay you, right? Those
no,
conference
God, no,
festivals?
no,
Yeah.
no. Like you get paid in a badge that you can attend other concerts during that festival. Um,
Right.
no, you never got paid for anything like that. But
How did that
hopefully you
feel
get
when,
paid along the way, right? Like it would be an
yeah.
anchor date. You get booked at South by Southwest, so you book 20 shows on the way to and from Austin.
And was that all, I assume you're in your 20s at the time of this hardcore circuiting.
Mhm.
At the time, are you loving most of it? Are you like, holy crap, where's the end road? Like I'm burning
No,
out.
I
How did
loved
it
it.
feel?
I loved it all. I
Yeah.
didn't have any kids. I was in a relationship. I've been with my wife for a long time, but I had no kids, and I was sort of fancy free, man. I loved it. I loved the vibe of being like, I'm Jack Kerouac out here, man. I'm just like writing songs and meeting people. And I'm a social guy, and I just made so many friends. I crashed on so many couches. Um, And I played with a lot of people who are like now super famous, you know, like I remember I did a couple shows in Australia with Passenger, and he was literally busking in between gigs. He was so broke, you know, like,
Yeah.
um, and now he can play to like whatever, 5,000 people anywhere in the world. Um, and you know, it happened a bunch of times. I remember I shared a stage with Vance Joy. Um, like, you know, he Riptide had like just come out and it was just sort of catching wind, but it was like he wasn't, you know, a name. Nobody knew who he was at this festival. It's fun to like think back and like, you know, my trajectory as an artist has never been as fruitful as any of those people. Maybe what I'm doing isn't quite so universally accessible or something like that. I don't know. But or maybe I've just not been as effective at selling myself. I don't know. But it's it warms my heart to sort of like see people that I know and who I think are good people achieving huge things, and then you kind of get to ride their coattails a little bit, you know, when they come to town. And I did a whole tour around Europe with the Lumineers last year, and you know, they're operating on a huge level. Like they're just the crew that they have, the production value of the show is it's just on another level. And like, you know, I think that there's probably a lot of people out there who are just think of the Lumineers as being hey ho, and it was like of a moment and stuff, but they've been consistently writing songs that people love, um, great songs and putting on great shows, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And like, I know how hard it is to like even just carry any kind of career in this industry, let alone one that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's the same thing. Like my like you know, obviously the big story in the industry the last couple of years is Taylor Swift, and I can't say her music like really does much for me and my soul and my heart. I think she's, you know, uh, a very song or a very strong songwriter. You know, obviously her as a craftsperson, she knows how to write a hit song, and she's very captivating in many ways. But the thing that really impresses me about Taylor Swift is like how hard it is to capture the zeitgeist to like be crushing the like worldwide pop culture scene, and then hold on to that rocket ship for like 15 straight years, and continually every record get a bigger audience with more, you know, of a chokehold on worldwide pop culture. Like that is so hard to do, and so deserving of like enormous respect.
Yeah, and to keep it together mentally, like she has like a squeaky clean PR record. It's really impressive.
Yeah,
What's the weirdest place you've ever played music, or the farthest away, or something you never thought you'd get to?
I played a few real weird. I played on a on like a barge in Dubai. That was weird. And then like midway through my set, like I guess like every day at a certain time, this like prayer kind of gets like piped over PAs over the whole city of Dubai, and everybody stops what they're doing and like kind of lowers their head and kind of like, you know, and so like right in the middle of my, nobody told me that this is going to happen during my show. So I'm like ripping it and everything. All of a sudden the PA shuts down. Like my guitar stops coming out of the monitor. The prayer's going all, or it's being piped over the whole city. I'm like, what's going on? That was pretty weird. I played in an aquarium in Brighton. Um, and it was sold to me like, oh yeah, you're gonna play in this aquarium, it's gonna be really cool, there's gonna be like a huge turtle floating behind you. So I'm like in there, and there was like this massive sea turtle floating behind me, and I'm like in this tank. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. But what they don't tell you is that, you know, aquariums have a very audible hum
Oh,
noise from
sure.
all the machinery and the tanks and stuff like that. So nobody could hear me. Like I even with the PA, like I'm playing, it's just like swallowing up all the. That was pretty bad. I played in a
Well,
laundromat in San Francisco once.
you got to do it. I mean, when you're out there doing the circuit, you're playing by yourself or bringing hauling your band guys around.
Both, yeah. I've probably spent about equal parts alone and with the band. Alone when it's financially the only way to do it. and with a band when it kind of like feels like you can invest a little bit more money.
You like being by yourself out there? Is how's the lonely factor?
Uh, I don't ever get lonely. Well, I mean that's not really true. Every now and then we'll get a little lonely. I don't mind being on my own. I'm like a total extrovert in some ways. I like people. I like meeting people. Pretty friendly guy, but I also really enjoy like going to a restaurant alone. Some people hate that. I have no problem doing that. Like
Yeah.
sitting and reading a book and eating steak or whatever. Like sign me up. Sounds awesome. And I honestly I don't mind playing alone either. And I think it's just that's how I cut my teeth in the early days. I just toured everywhere alone, and so a band always felt like a luxury. And every now and then, like I'm gonna go do a flying up to Whitehorse this weekend to play a solo show in the theater up there, and yeah, I love. I when I'm playing alone, I don't really have a set list. I just like get up there and I play like whatever the first 4 or 5 songs that come to mind, and then I'll just ask people what they want to hear, and I'll basically like take
Oh,
requests for a
fun.
couple hours and tell stories and crack jokes. It's great.
Love it. Dan Mangan, great to talk to you. You're an easy fella to riff with. And yeah, hopefully we get to connect in real life. I'll give you a shout if I ever make it to Vancouver, which is
Yeah, where
pretty
you?
far from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yeah, Milwaukee. That's right. I never played Milwaukee. I
It's
don't know what.
time.
It's
You're
time.
due, man.
Yeah. Well, we'll grab a coffee.
Love it. Dan Mangan, dirt from the road. Much love, brother. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brett. Take care, man.